Get the weirdest spam. I mean, we all get weird spam. Check this out. This is spam that about 1 minute ago came through. Where are we? Here we go. To the Have I Been Pwned support system, ticketing system. Discover the benefits of human hair extensions for Have I Been Pwned. Okay. Hi, support. I hope you're having a 2 coffee day. I'm Amy Wang, and I'm reaching out to share some exciting features of our premium human hair extensions, perfect for enhancing, that was spelled correctly, Have I Been Pwned's range of offer. Can you imagine, come to Have I Been Pwned, it's like, what would you like, data breaches? Human hair extensions. But here's the best bit. Why choose our human hair extensions? Premium quality made from 100% virgin human hair. Ensuring natural look and feel. I don't know if that makes a big difference. There's a variety of options. You can choose from Brazilian, Indian, Peruvian, and Vietnamese hair materials to suit your specific needs. Good durability is one of the highlights here. Customization. From bundles, closures, frontals to wigs, we offer extensive customization options to meet unique requirements. It is kind of fascinating that here we are in like 2025. We've been dealing with spam for 3 decades, and we still can't get on top of just outright rubbish like this. I'm going to go through there in the ticketing system. I'm going to mark that as spam, and then I will never get any more again, and it will be solved. Yeah, anyway, it doesn't quite work that way. Where are we? Who's here? No Division. Good evening. So you're somewhere else. We're just after 7 o'clock in the morning tomorrow. At the moment here in Australia, Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day. Let's talk about some data breaches on Valentine's Day. Mark says from home improvements to hair extensions. Covering the topics, Troy. Yeah, let's talk about some more of the home improvement stuff in a moment as well. Scott's here as well. G'day, Scott. Did you put photos of your new thing on the public thing or just on the Facebook thing? You should share your new thing because it does look very cool, man. I'll give you full credit for that. Wayne says the gain seems a bit high. Oh, it might be. Hang on. Let's turn this down. And the reason why it might be, that's not making much difference. This one. Let's try this one. Yeah. Yeah, maybe. The reason why it might be, I can probably, can I tweak it there? Can't tweak it there. Lock volume, don't want to do that. Audio struggling. I was taking the PC apart the other day. I'm gonna, if I speak a bit quieter, is that audio okay, or does it still feel like it gains too much? Oh, I found the button. That's much better, isn't it? I can see the levels look much better. I've got this Focusrite digital to analog converter just there, and it sits on top of the PC. And I was processing data that exceeded all of my capacities. Mark says quite a bit less pain. I'm going to go just a tad higher. Yeah. Okay. I think that's pretty much back to where it is based on levels I can see here. I was processing a data breach. It's still a logs. There's nothing. I was going to say it's nothing too exciting. I think it's actually really interesting because it's more than a terabyte worth of data. But I was going through this data and I realized I had no capacity left. So I'm looking around me and I had like a spare 22 terabyte disk over there, which I tried to put in my my Synology rack-mounted NAS the other day, and it was an incompatible drive and it got upset. I actually put 2 in there. One of them it accepted and then the other one it didn't. WD red. So the one it didn't accept, I tried that. Apparently that doesn't work. Put that in the machine here. And then I look around, there's another 10 terabyte disk there, which I must have upgraded from somewhere. So pulling the PC apart, getting the disk in order to put a terabyte worth of SteelaLogs in there that I can start extracting data out into, and then quasi-processing it in bits, needing multiple terabytes, pulled the whole PC apart, obviously bumped a knob. So thank you for raising that. Sorry about the high gain before. Let's do sponsor, which is actually really interesting this week. So it's 1Password again, no surprises there. 1Password needs no introduction, but just to sort of recap on the angle that 1Password is on these days. Very much around XAM, Extended Accessibility Management, secure every sign-in for every app on every device. They've got a new marketing agency that sends a bunch of host ad-lib points. And not in here, which I think is actually the most interesting thing, is the Red Bull F1 team sponsorship that came out this week. Now, I'm not sure if you've seen this, but it's one of those things where I got up in the morning and I looked at it pre-coffee. It's like, what? Really? That's cool. 1Password, Red Bull F1. I had a little bit of an inkling about this some time ago because 1Password sponsored the President's Cup in Montreal in Canada, which Charlotte and I went along to in September, I think end of September last year. Really awesome event. And it was just for such a company that I've known for so long, and they started from humble beginnings. And I started using them in 2011 now. Geez, yeah, we're 14 years in. And watching them grow and then turning up to like this major international golf tournament, which is, if you've ever been to a golf tournament, it's massive because of all the golf courses. And everywhere you walk, there's like 1Password stuff everywhere. And I was like, wow, how did we get to this point? And sometime after that, I spoke to someone there responsible for marketing, and he'd sort of said something like, oh, look, it was a really big success. You know, think about maybe doing something in F1. And I'm like, oh, okay, maybe you'll go to an F1 event and there'll be a 1Password logo somewhere. And now this is like literally 1Password CEO sitting down with Christian Horner, the team principal of Red Bull. For those of you who are watching Drive to Survive, you know all about this, or you're just interested in Formula One. But this is just super cool to see 1Password not only sponsoring them, but inevitably from a bunch of the material I've read, actually doing a bunch of internal stuff to help Red Bull, the most successful team in Formula One for the last few years, secure their internal things. Will we see 1Password logo on Oracle Red Bull racing car this year? So this is the Q&A 1Password. Yes. 1Password logo will be visible on the Formula One cars driven by Max Verstappen and Liam Lawson. This includes on the car's body, inside the protective halo. Look, if you've ever watched F1, it has to be one of the most sponsored events possible, just because you've got the car and the race suit and the helmet and the pits, and there are so many different places where you get sponsorship designed to maximize the exposure. Inside the protective halo above the driver's head. So you're going to get that from like the driver's view. On the steering wheel, digital display during its startup sequence. So when they start the car, they're going to see on this, how much, Scott's a big F1 fan, how much does an F1 steering wheel cost? It's like tens, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds. Like, it's ridiculous. You're going to have 1Password logo on there. That's wild. What do you love the most about Formula One? Okay, well, then that sort of goes on and on. But there's an interview with Melton. So Melton's the Chief Marketing Officer for 1Password. Great guy, really interesting to talk to. But it's just so cool to see this. So anyway, I think I should go along to a Formula One. I was going to say Formula One match. Formula One race as a... Scott says maybe a couple of $100,000. Yeah, just for the steering wheel. Yeah, which could probably buy the very nice car Scott has just posted photos of on his socials. Good choice, Scott. I'm happy with that. And I like the fact that it has a turbo. I think that's great. You're never going to live that down. I think I should go along to a Formula One match. Formula One race. And hang out with 1Password like we did at the President's Cup. Anyway, so getting back to extended access management. One of the things I was actually speaking to Melton about just recently is it would be really interesting to start mapping some of the data breaches we've seen that took advantage of effectively unmanaged devices or devices that were not sufficiently managed that could be identified by XAM and supported by extended access management. So I want to try and tie these things together rather than it just being a read the script. So yeah, let's see what comes up. We'll see what we can do in that space. Now, for those of you wondering what Scott's talking about, Scott has bought a car that has, we'll see if anyone here can pick what car it is, because I would have known immediately. And I still gave him hell for it. What car is being sold today with the word turbo in it that not only doesn't have a turbo, but it doesn't have an internal combustion engine? But you buy this car, which is purely electric, and there's a big turbo on it, which I think is interesting. the same manufacturer used to have their Halo car, the one at the very top, would always be called Turbo. And now they've got turbos in a bunch of the other ones, but they're not turbos. It's only the one at the top, which is the Turbo. Marx says Macan. In the right vicinity, but no. All right, let's just start with the controversial stuff, the Doge thing. Oh boy, people got upset about this. So, you know how things are a bit weird in America at the moment, like especially at the moment, and somehow Trump and Elon got elected. I think that's the way it works. And incidentally, like as an Aussie watching this, and Scott's in the UK, I know there's a bunch of people in here that are in the US, but as people outside the US watching this, I feel like we have a much greater understanding of your politics than you do ours. And I'm sure that if I was to ask most of you who our Prime Minister was, you wouldn't know. And I actually have to stop and think about it carefully. Yes, we do have one. We don't have a president as Prime Minister. But we see so much of what happens in the US. So much of the popular culture in the world is centered around the US. Most of the movies we watch are American movies. We see so much US politics and we see so much of the dramas unfolding. But we see it from this distant lens where we're sort of up here on the other side of the world, kind of eating the popcorn for a little bit. And in many ways, it doesn't have as direct an impact. It certainly impacts us in many other ways. We've seen things like currency fluctuations allegedly due to Trump getting in, which incidentally have been very good for us because most of what we earn is in US dollars, and that's been getting very strong lately. But it is a little bit of a soap opera to watch this. And as I said before, I think one of the things that I absolutely lament the most about the way it's been in the US, I'd say probably since that 2016 election era, is how just utterly polarizing it seems to be. And you end up with people that are so vehemently on one side or vehemently on the other side, just aggressive, angrily so. And anything that happens on the left is woke culture, and anything that happens on the right is Nazis. And it just, I was talking to Charlotte about this one. She said it's like watching children in kindergarten. It's like, yeah, it is. A lot of this is like watching children in kindergarten. And what it means is it's so hard when there is a piece of news to filter through what is one side being hyperbolic about the other side. Now, with that in mind, there are loads of sound grabs, especially from Trump and Elon, where you look at the sound grab and you just go, what are you thinking? Like, this is ridiculous. However, depending on where you watch, you get the ones that paint that narrative. And I think what's become interesting as Twitter has definitely gone from very left-leaning to, I would argue, much more central. I don't think it's not a Gab or a Parler, and if you don't know what I mean by those, go and look at those platforms. And the only reason I have looked at them is because they've both had data breaches of different kinds. And it is extreme on one side. So, the Doge situation, where it does seem odd that Elon has been appointed. Did you see the interview this week? There's another one of these things where I got up like pre-coffee and I'm looking at this going, is this like from Saturday Night Live or something? Like, why is Elon standing behind Trump with that stupid hat and a jacket and his kids there picking his nose? Like, what? Anyway, it's entertaining. The Doge situation, in terms of the fact that they've got a bunch of young guys. I keep seeing the words kids used. And again, like look at the language which is constantly used by both sides to paint an otherwise factual situation with their own bias and negativity. I keep saying the word kids. Well, they're not. They're young adults. Maybe because you're old enough like me that they seem like kids. But when you're in your mid-20s, you're not a kid by any stretch of the imagination. Or tech bros is the other word, or the other term, which is obviously a negative slight on the fact that they're all males. That tends to be the context that that's used in. It's obviously a very different way of approaching access to government systems, what we're used to. And this is what we're sort of getting to now, the fact that you do have these guys that Elon's brought in, which now have access to these systems. And the reason why this came across my radar this week, for the most part, this is politics. And then it does get into my wheelhouse because it's data breaches. So Kim Z has written a story here, and she's quoted the headline here. She said, "This is the largest IT security breach in our country's history. You can't unring this bell. Once these Doge guys have access to these data systems, they can ostensibly do what they want." Now, I took issue with the characterization that it is A, a data breach, or B, the largest one in the country's history. And the reason I took issue with it, we'll go through the tweet I quoted here and then some more backstory on this. I'll just read my tweet. I said, "I've had a few people flag this with me as a data breach. It's not. It's authorized access. Not liking that authorization does not make it a data breach. If one of these guys and accidentally leaks it all over the place to unauthorized parties, then it's a data breach." Now, I thought this was pretty obvious. They have been given access to the system by authorized parties. That's how it was done. It was someone who has the authorization to be able to give other people authorization. There is this parallel thread here where a lot of people are unhappy with the fact that the tech bro children, to use the term as it's negatively applied, have access to that data. There are people who say it's outright illegal, and they'll point to the judge rescinding access, and they'll point to the EFF taking their lawsuit. A lot of this is politicking and arguing about who should have access to what, and whether or not there was the authority from the president, I assume it came from him before it went to Musk, the authority to access this data. And they're all relevant and valid discussions, but none of it changes the fact that they were given access by an authorized party. I think a lot of this gets very into the weeds very quickly. So a lot of the argument I've seen and a lot of the pushback I saw on this was the fact that, well, they could then provide that to other parties. Well, yes, like anyone with access to an authorized system could then provide it to other parties, and then it becomes a data breach. And right in the back of my mind, I suddenly got that memory of here in Australia, and there are many other similar examples. Some years ago, someone in an authorized privileged position to our Medicare system was selling Medicare details. So Medicare details is like your Medicare number is effectively like your health provider ID here. And they were selling that data to other buyers. Each instance of that was a data breach. Authorized party meant to have access, they abused the access to do something, which then turned it into a breach. Now, look, we'll see where all this legal stuff ends up, but, you know, even that is so hard to pick these days. I was sure Trump was going to jail. Like, isn't that the way it panned out? He was guilty of all of these criminal charges. He's going to jail. And now he's sitting in the White House with Elon's 5-year-old son picking his nose. You know, like, how did that end up? So I guess we'll see how that legal side of it plays out. But I lament the fact that something that we could look at very objectively and factually and say, okay, look, a bunch of people got access to this data to do analysis. It's highly unusual. There are risks. There are potential upsides as well. You know, it might actually be that they find some inefficiency. And honestly, how many times have all of us looked at government and gone, gee, that seems like a waste? I'm sure they'll find some stuff. I'm absolutely sure they'll find stuff. Now, will it be to the volume that Elon talks up? And again, I say this as an outsider, just watching the news, mostly for entertainment purposes. I don't know, but we know that at least the representations of why they are there and what they're there to do does have some basis in fact, insofar as there's a lot of wastage. So I think we'll see what it actually turns into. It's all just so weird. It's so weird at the moment. And then there was that one with that handle of Big Balls, because I just noticed Jack Resider here commenting on my thread. He's like, Big Balls did leak it. It's why he got fired, or so I heard. Now, Jack later rescinded that position because even I, as a non-American, know that that bit was not quite right, because then he came back and he said, oh, sorry, that was 2022. Media led me astray on that one. Yeah, but this is the point, right? Like, got to watch my step. So from memory, without clicking through Jack's link and reading the whole thing, that guy had worked for some other firm where he had leaked some information that he wasn't meant to. And I'm not sure that it was quite as blatantly malicious as that, but the stories get conflated, the headline gets picked up. We all have our own confirmation biases, so we pick the thing that works for us, and then we share that, and the story replicates, regardless of whether it's accurate or not. And just reading the comments here, it's kind of infuriating for a combination of the things that are just so clearly, blatantly wrong, but also the things that are so clearly, blatantly, highly emotional. Now, one person here has said, if they have more than read-only access, it is a data breach. Huh? Just saw Daniel's comment, crazy timeline we're in. Yeah, absolutely. It's so weird. All right. Whether or not you have read access or read and write access is not the qualifier for a data breach. There's a lot of data breaches in Have I Been Pwned where someone has taken a database backup. They can't write to the original source, but it is a data. There's nowhere in the definition of data breach. And incidentally, just to sort of go back to this, let's get that definition of data breach, because I think this is what tends to get missed. Let's see if ChatGPT can give it to me to find. I won't ask DeepSeek, or I will get a very different answer. I know everyone's throwing the same sort of prompts at DeepSeek, but it is fascinating to throw some carefully worded prompts in there that you're going to get very, very different answers from a Chinese-backed service. A data breach is an incident where sensitive, confidential, or protected information is accessed, disclosed, or stolen without authorization. And again, there is authorization. You might not like the authorization, but there is authorization. And then the counter argument then will be, well, there shouldn't have been authorization because it was someone who was unauthorized to do the authorization. There's another angle I want to come back to in a moment, but let me read through some of these comments here. Yeah, someone said here, Snowden, Manning, all authorized access, right? They all had authorization and allowed access to information. Are we applying consistent standards? Well, yes, they did all have authorization, and it wasn't a data breach until they took the data and they sent it to an unauthorized party. Like, can you see where it becomes a data breach? So it's that redistribution to the unauthorized parties that is the problem. Someone here says, I don't know why this is so controversial. I mean, you can dislike that Musk and his Doge team were given access, but they're clearly authorized, the head of the executive branch himself, President Trump. And then people will argue with that, and then they'll say, well, the president's not able to authorize it. And you just go round and round and round. So here's another way of thinking about it. And that's the clear definition of the data breach is around unauthorized access. And there was authorization here, and then there's the argument about whether it should have been granted or not. I would argue that there are other characteristics that we often see in data breaches that are not present here. One of those characteristics is malice. Now, there will be some people who go, yes, but Elon is trying to erode the United States from the inside to line his own wallet. Now, maybe there's a degree of that. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that's in his own interest. But in terms of whether or not the data was accessed with the intent of causing harm, which we see in so many data breaches, doesn't seem to be the case. It's not the case. Look, until proven otherwise, that's not it. Often the data is accessed in order to extort the owner of the data. We see this with ransomware. We increasingly see this with classic data breaches. You get your SQLi, your database backup. Give me money or I'm going to leak the thing publicly. Clearly, extortion is not the goal here. We often see it being used, data breaches, in order to build someone's credibility. How many times do you see on Have I Been Pwned? The person that sent this to me asked me to attribute it to blah. That's not the case here. All of the typical, almost sort of side effects of a data breach are not present here. Another side effect of a data breach is that usually, hopefully, there's some form of disclosure either to the regulator or, in an ideal world, to the impacted individuals as well. We're not obviously seeing that. When someone fronts up and starts making submissions to each of the state regulatory bodies about the fact that there's been a data breach due to Doge, then we can have that discussion, but that's not going to happen. So we'll see. I just fear that even if this, I think it's fair to say, experiment of giving a bunch of young guys access this data, even if it turns out to empirically be positive, there'll be a bunch of people who'll be very upset about it, you know. And I'm sure by the same token, as Trump solves world hunger tomorrow, there'll be a bunch of people who'll be very upset about it, because we're just at a point where there are so many people in that mindset. Again, going both ways as well. Geez, how long we sit here and complain about how much Republicans would just lose their mind over ridiculous stuff. Anyway, Daniel says, isn't it all public spending? James says they weren't vetted through the usual process. I don't think was legal. Yeah, and look, I mean, we've heard that a lot as well. I'm going to, as I say, stay in my lane about the data breach stuff. I don't know what the legal requirement for vetting is. I honestly don't know the actual level of access these guys have. Look, I do think it's pretty extensive, because you then hear Elon, when he's there with little Elon in Trump's office the other day, talking about much more specific examples about, descriptions on costs and things not being submitted on Treasury expenses. Well, I assume you'd have to see the expense then to notice that, hey, this person spent $1 billion and there's no coding against it. So anyway, the only thing we know for sure is it's going to be fun and entertaining for quite some time yet, I think. All right. Speaking of fun and entertaining, we're redesigning the Have I Been Pwned user experience. Now, I've been speaking for ages about doing the branding stuff and some UX work. The brand work is almost complete. I'm pretty happy with what we've got. When I'm really, really happy, I'll share it publicly. We are now transitioning into the design aspect of the website. And from there, so this is going to be very much a visual design, that the themes and the color, what do buttons and forms and stuff like that look like. And then from there, we've actually got to start designing more of the user experience in terms of things like when you do a search for a data breach and you see the results. Yeah, someone had a good suggestion for me yesterday. They said, it would be good if when you do the search, the 1Password stuff, so, you get, let's just see what it looks like. We go to Have I Been Pwned. What did I design now? It's a long time ago. You go to Have I Been Pwned, big email address box, and just under that is generates secure unique passwords for every account. It's 1Password's product placement, just like you see on the Formula One car in 2025 season. You go in there, that's fine. You whack in your email address, testedexample.com. That guy has been in every breach. And then you get the results, and you've got a fairly substantial 1Password banner on top of that. And then you've actually got to scroll down, possibly beneath the fold, before you see the results. And someone sort of pointed out the other day that it's not a good UX pattern, and I completely agree. And I think what we should do is we should get that 1Password stuff, first of all, completely visually redesigned, but then sitting down beneath those sets of breaches. So that's a really good example. The other thing is, like, I look at the front page at the moment. Let's just reload that and get rid of the results. And other than the numbers and the breaches, it has not changed since 2013. Now, one of the questions that people keep asking is like, why redesign it if it works? Well, because it can work better, much, much better. I don't know that it makes a lot of sense to have all the headline numbers we have there on the front page, at least not taking up so much space. 14,647,463,223 pwned accounts. Okay, we could probably round that a little bit, maybe take up some less space. We've got the latest breaches and the most recently added breaches. Maybe, again, we could optimize that a little bit, but there's a lot of stuff missing from here that needs to be there. So, for example, people that have got subscriptions for API keys and domains, like, where's the subscription link? People that are interested in taking them out, where's the bit that explains what the service actually does? It wasn't in there to begin with because I didn't think anyone would take it seriously. I just didn't worry about it. So there's loads of stuff like that. I would really, really like to see better visualizations. And in fact, the vision that I have in mind here is that we will go to the point where everyone has effectively their own subscriber page. And there'll be some subscribers that pay some money for the API keys and domain searches, but then the vast bulk of people will just be your normal everyday people who have a subscriber page that lists, excuse me, the data breaches that they've been in, just like when you do a search today. It will also list their opt-out settings. It will also list their sensitive breaches. This is after sort of post-email verification. And then it might also have a bunch of visualizations. So how cool would it be to take the data that is in there about so many of us now, especially when we've been in lots of breaches, and visualize it in a way that is more readily consumable? So they're the sorts of things that we're trying to work out at the moment. And I suggested to Stefan, who's messaging me on the back channel but not listening here, I suggested to Stefan that maybe we should just get to a point of sufficient confidence where we've got the brand and the basic website design and layout, and then we'll just open source the whole lot, and we'll just have a static website, and we'll seek input. And up until that point, I'd really like to get more input from people where they can say, and then this is the tweet I put out the other day, it's like, hey, look, we're redesigning the UX, what would you like to see? And I did have some really good suggestions, that moving that product placement for 1Password being one of them. So that's what we're working on. And at least once we have this new design, this new model done, I think we'll be able to iterate a lot more quickly when we have good ideas. But if you do have ideas, I'd really, really like to get those through, because now's the easiest time while we're designing static pages. James says, when the site was started, I was highly skeptical. Why should I give this guy my email? So I've had this question so many times, and people are like, why should I trust you with my email? My email is private. No, it's not. Like, your email address doesn't work unless you give it to other people. That's the whole point of the email. It's like a phone number. And then I go, well, you were happy giving it to like LinkedIn and Dropbox and Ashley Madison, weren't you? Well, yeah. Why won't you put it in here? You know, like, this is not a massive email harvesting campaign. I guess one of the things, like, just thinking about everything that's changed, one of the things that is very different now and that we could lean on more is that this service is used by so many big companies and governments and has been so extensively covered in the press. I'll come back to the reseller thing later, because that's in the press now. That I could probably have logos there that make it look important, but it feels a bit stupid. We'll see. I guess the point is it has now become a mainstream, respectable service. So maybe that needs to get a bit reflected somewhere without being too obnoxious about it. Again, if you have ideas about how to do that, I think it might be a bridge too far to go and start listing all the law enforcement agencies or governments that we're working with. But maybe somewhere there's a section of, Have I Been Paying currently provides support to these governments, and there's just like a series of flags, or I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. Send your ideas. Okay, Zax. Now, Zax is a investment research company, and they had a breach several years ago. About 9 million people in total that end up in Have I Been Paying. Last week. Well, actually, it goes back further than that. Yesterday, I added another Zax data breach, 12 million people. Now, this appears to be a breach that happened in about the middle of last year, from memory. It then appeared for sale on a popular, for sale or download, I can't remember which one. It appeared on a popular hacking forum, 25th of Jan. There's a story here from Dark Web Informer on the same date showing this. The hacking forum in question has published a bunch of PII data in the advertisement for it. Someone sent me the data very recently. I've gone through, verified it, and I've spoken a lot about how to do verification before, but it's interesting verifying something which is a subsequent breach of the prior thing, because you can go through and you can pull out all the email addresses prior to the breach date of breach 1, and they come back and Have I Been Pwned as belonging to Zax, and then all the newer stuff comes back as not belonging to Zax. So it was quite easy to go back and go, yep, all the old stuff does actually appear in the previous breach, which they disclosed as well, so there's no argument about that. All the new stuff doesn't, but they do have enumeration vectors which made it easy to verify that those email addresses do indeed exist on the site. And then I'm left in this conundrum again, where we've got the situation where there's a post on a hacking forum alleging, you've got to use that word, alleging a data breach. So, all right, let's get in touch with them. So I contact their support address, which is the published address. Can't get anything. I've been chatting to a well-known InfoSec journo. He can't get anything either. I'm like, okay, I'll do what I normally do. I'll go to LinkedIn and I will find the CTO and I will go through and I will contact them and I'll say, hey, look, there's this thing. Don't know if you're aware. Can I send you the data? Went there, found the CTO. Can't send them a message because they still haven't replied to the message I sent them about their last data breach. And when you send an email to someone who you haven't connected to before, you can't just follow up with more messages. Onto the Twitters, sending messages on Twitter. Anyone got a contact, tagging them. They are active on the Twitter. Nothing back. So anyway, went into Have I Been Pwned yesterday. This must be nearly 24 hours ago now. Obviously, a lot of people got notifications because there's nearly 12 million people in the breach, and we see anywhere up to about 1%. Now, it was a bit under 1% for these guys, but we did send some tens of thousands of email notifications to our subscribers that were in there. And so far, no one has come back and said, look, I didn't have an account there, it wasn't accurate. So even though I've said alleged in the breach description to align with what was reported and the fact that I haven't been able to get confirmation from them, excuse me, I think I can say with a very high degree of confidence that this does appear to be legitimate data. Oh, Stefan's here. Good timing. We were just talking about you. I said, I think you're agreeing with me about something relevant. So anyway, that's Dax. That is Dax. Yeah, anyway, that's a data breach. Scott says, technically, Have I Been Pwned is a massive email harvesting campaign. Yeah, but we don't save them. Well, I guess if you talk about, we might harvest them from data breaches. Sounds like a bad word, doesn't it, harvest? We might aggregate them from data breaches, but we certainly don't harvest them or store them or capture them or do anything else. And Stefan knows, he's here, he's seen all the code. We're not saving them when people search for them. Yeah, what are the really, now that I think about it like this, why would we? Like, what possible upside would there be when we're sitting on billions and billions of email addresses anyway? What possible upside would there be when someone does a search to save what would we do with it? Like, we're not going to spam them directly and sell them something. We're not going to sell their email addresses for other people to spam them to buy hair extensions or something like that. Like, it would make absolutely no sense. So no, we don't do that. Next thing here, incoming Stealer logs. Now, I mentioned this just before, and we've spoken about Stealer logs many times, and they do appear to be gaining, let's say, notoriety. We're seeing so many different Telegram channels, for example, publishing Stealer logs. So many different Stealer logs then republished onto data breach forums. So many Stealer logs being used as the vector by which people gain access to execute larger data breaches. They're a massive problem. They're just a massive, massive problem. But there are so many of them, and there's so much noise that the trick for us with Have I Been Pwned is to figure out how do we get relevant information in front of people without it just being like the constantly ringing the Stealer log bell and becoming obnoxious about it. Because there's a lot of discrete actual data breaches, like the allegedly Zach's situation as well. You know, that's still sort of the bread and butter. Someone from a government sent me a couple of files a couple of weeks ago, a couple of Stealer log files, and they had about 15 million email addresses in them. And I started looking at it and went down the rabbit hole of where that data had first appeared in the Telegram channel it was posted in. And I was actually about to publish just sort of the 15 million because it was unique enough compared to the other data we already had in Have I Been Pwned. And of course now, as of last month, we've started adding the domains that email addresses appear against in Stealer log as well. So there's something else useful in there for people. And I was about to publish it. In fact, I even sent Stefan the passwords. I'm like, hey, here's the passwords, mate. Queue them all up. And then I was like, oh, this isn't this isn't 2 files. If you follow the leads, it's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of files, and it's over a terabyte worth of data. So at the moment, and this is why earlier on, before you joined, Stefan, I had the gain on my microphone all screwed up because I've been pulling the PC apart, trying to figure out where I could fit another 10 terabyte disk in order to do some data processing. So now we're just churning through these files, trying to extract out the email addresses into one pile, trying to extract out the unique passwords into another. And I came down this morning and my little console app had run out of memory, so I'm not doing that very well. And then also the email address domain pairs, same problem, out of memory. I'll figure out what happened to that later. We're trying to extract all of these out, and then sometime, hopefully today, those processes will be fixed and finished, and we'll end up with a unique number of email addresses, which I suspect will be, I wonder if, I am actually using our, it's running here on the other screen, I'm using our email extractor open source tool here. I think it actually reports on progress as it goes through. I'm not sure if that reports across. Oh yeah, addresses extracted 228 million. Yeah, okay, yeah, so that's sizable. That's very sizable. 228 million email addresses there. We will get the distinct passwords with counts, and then we'll get the email address and domain pairings out as well. This is just going to take forever, because if it's 228 million unique email addresses and then each one of those appears across multiple domains, crikey. Okay. Hopefully next week we'll get this live. But yeah, that will be another very substantial set of data. I honestly still don't know what the right answer is in terms of how we handle this and what sort of cadence we have. Like, I'm conscious we push stuff out about the middle of next month. I called it Jan 2025. And then people were like, all right, so does that mean that you're going to do like Feb 2025 and March? And I was like, oh, crap. I don't really want to set that expectation, because I don't want to be in a situation where we feel like we've got to forcibly push through data. And I also don't want to be in a situation where there needs to be like a monthly cadence. It just feels more like when there is a sufficiently new corpus of data, that's the time. Stefan says, time to scale up the DB, I guess. Yeah, mate, I think it will be. The chart on my wall, I'm still looking at my big wall of charts, which I am going to blog yet. I just haven't got a few things quite right. I saw you messaging me in the background, Stefan, something about those error messages, but at the moment it's showing loads of failed requests on my Grafana chart, which doesn't make for a good look. And then there's other stuff, like I've got a chart here of our email delivery, how many emails we're delivering, based on the function executions, because we've got we've actually got an Azure function which sends the email. So every time we send an email, we drop it in an Azure storage account. We drop it in a queue. It sits there, and then a function picks it up and sends it out via SendGrid. And we should be looking at function executions. But Stefan, yesterday I started doing an aggregated count of that, because I just wanted to see a graph for like the last 12 hours. How many emails have you sent? And it was saying like 300,000 when it should have been about 100,000, and I just realized that Grafana takes a lot of time to get to grips with. I absolutely love Grafana. It's so cool. The graphs are amazing. But I need a Grafana expert to just sit down and go, okay, cool, right, so here's how you do this. Here's little stuff like, I would like the email delivery on that y-axis when it gets past 1,000 to put a comma there. And I'm like, oh, this must be easy because I've done Excel before and I know that you just go in, you format the number. And then you Google it and it's like, no, you really need to change that at the data source, which doesn't make sense to me, because wouldn't that at the data source then convert that into a string? And obviously it's coming through as an integer because it's able to plot it on a chart. So yeah, anyway. John Bristow's here. G'day, mate. Hey, John, if you know more about Grafana than me, can you come around and help me? Stefan says we can fix it. And I'm sure we can, but the problem is that I see so many of these little things, and every time I see one of these things, I'm like, all right, let's just fix this one little thing. And then half an hour just disappears Googling for Grafana things. So, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, so Scott says he really wants to know about the chart wall. I just had another Pi 5 arrive yesterday to set this up in Charlotte's office as well. She's I just put an old spare monitor in there, but we're rebuilding her office as part of rebuilding everything at the moment. And I want to get one of those Samsung frame TVs in her office because you can put like nice artwork and stuff like that on it. Gary has one. I mentioned Gary to you, Scott. He's the guy with the cars and the thing in the home theater room. They look really cool. So I'm going to get that Pi 5 set up in her office with nice charts and things, and particularly, you know, where she's at with tickets and stuff like that. Yeah, but it does look really cool. John says he wrote a custom data source for Octopus Deploy to display deployment data to Grafana. Oh yeah, that'd be cool. The XTB says, I'm jealous of your office. It looks so comfy. It's a really, really cool office. This is normally a bedroom, and we've converted it into an office. And I mean, mind you, it'll be 10 years in September since I've been in this house. And this has just always been the office because working from home, and I get a lot of space in here. And we did things like, you know, built the desk, which is the opening is almost as wide as my arms, and I'm 197 centimeters tall. So it'll give you an idea. We built it that wide so Charlotte and I could sit here together with the wall of screen, and things like the acoustic paneling we did to make stuff like this sound better. And it's just been gradually over the years getting better and better and better. COVID is partly to thank for that. Insofar as we're being stuck here, I was like, all right, let's make it really, really cool in this environment. The pennies just dropping for John, 10 years. Yeah, so John is a fellow Gold Coaster here, and John for many years was trying to tell me to move back to the Gold Coast where I'd previously lived and loved. And yeah, that worked pretty well, mate. So we're getting old, dude. Maybe, I don't know. Stephen says acoustic panels are awesome. So what I've got, and there's blog posts and stuff on this, but on this wall here and on the roof ceiling is acoustic paneling that looks really cool and was a nightmare to get done right, mostly because stuff was meant to join up at the corners, and it turns out that rooms that look like they're right angles everywhere don't actually have right angles everywhere because there's like weird wavy things. But we eventually got it right. There's a few more things we want to do yet. I'm really happy with the TV. So anyway, yeah, Scott said I'd like to see how I did that wall of charts. I will write it up. There's 2 things left I have to do mechanically with the Pi to get right. So one is I've got to get the mouse cursor to hide. So at the moment, the Pi boots up, automatically logs in. It pops open Chromium in kiosk mode, so it doesn't have scroll bars or address bar or anything like that. But then there's just this one little mouse cursor sitting on the screen. And there's a bunch of different packages that you can install to make that hide. The 30 minutes I had to play with it, didn't get it to work. I'm going to pick that up again maybe today, make that work before I set up Charlotte's. And then the other thing is with Grafana, you can load a dashboard via GET request. There are multiple query string parameters that can do things like set the time period you're displaying. So I've gone with a 12-hour time period. I found that was the most useful because it means I can get up in the morning, I can see what's happened overnight without having data that's too useless before that. I can see all the database scales and things that happened as soon as I walk into the office. There's a refresh rate. So how often do I want the charts to refresh? And there is the parameter to set it into kiosk mode. And for some reason, even though they're sitting there in the URL, every single time this dashboard loads after reboot, those parameters are not set correctly. So I end up going into Pi Connect, which is effectively RDP for the Pi, and having to set the stuff. And then when I next reboot the Pi, for whatever reason, I have to reset it all. So when I get those 2 things right, I will have mechanically gotten everything with the Pi right. I can set Charlotte's up as well. And then with your help as well, Stefan, I just want to get that dashboard just that little bit more perfect, and then I'll be able to, to blog it all up. It's not a hard thing. It's actually a really, really easy thing that the Pi set up. Just those tiny, tiny little configuration things. VXWB likes the black vibe, villain lair. So as Scott and John have seen, as I've been in our house here, Charlotte has, being Norwegian, she's got this very Nordic style, which I really like. There's a really big thing here. I think being a very beachy coastal area, really big thing here of Hampton style. You must have seen this, John. Hampton style all over the place, where it's all very like light and beachy, and I don't know how else to describe it. I guess just Google it, and you just see it over and over and over and over and over again. And like it's a nice style, but because this is so different, like people walk into this house and they're like, holy shit, like that is awesome. And the style that you see in my room here, and I have posted photos of things like the garage and other areas of the house before, that's the thing that persists throughout the house. So yeah, that's really cool. But yes, it is a dark style, but it's dark with a lot of textures as well. So you probably only get a bit of a sense of it here, but there's a lot of like warm lights and nice textures and patterns and things. So it doesn't feel too Villains Lairish. I think it's the right way to put it. VXDB says you have that massive ultra wide monitor, right? I was looking at Samsung G9. If you Google Troy Hunt Ultimate Home Office, you'll find the exact specs. So yeah, I've got an ultra wide in the middle and then two like normal wides either side of it. And I did that at the start of COVID. So what are we now? Probably nearly 5 years ago. And to this day, like that is just, it is perfect. That is the absolute perfect layout. Can't recommend it highly enough. So yes to that. John says uninstall the mouse driver from the Pi. I think there's another way of doing that. Joss64 Big, who I feel has come in after I had the Doge discussion. Given the recent breaches of essentially Musk selling and eventually selling everyone's data, is there any way we can, should, or we are just screwed? Go back and watch the start of this later on. I don't think it's a data breach. I don't think it meets the criteria of a data breach. Is there anything we can, should do? A move to Australia or Canada? I don't know. Go back and watch it because it's obviously highly, highly political and emotionally charged. Stephen says, can't you use CSS to set the cursor as hidden? You don't need to. To use CSS to do that, I would have to add CSS to the Grafana dashboard. It's not really what I want to do. There are various packages that I can pull into the Pi which will hide the cursor after 10 seconds of inactivity, for example. That's definitely the right way to do this. I've just got to get on and do that properly. John says everything must be light/white here on the Gold Coast. It does feel like that. But and Charlotte and I were having this discussion because she's going to be the designer for all the new bits we're building now as well. We were going to go and get a designer, an interior designer, and for various reasons decided that was a bad idea. So she's going to continue that design, and she kind of. Actually, I think it was other friends made the point. It's like when people walk into the house, they're like, wow, that's so cool because it is really, really different. I think it's really different without being polarizing. Like I've walked into houses before and gone, that's different. Who the hell would ever buy that? I don't think that's the case here. Last thing, reseller update. This got a lot more interest than what I thought it would. Last week, I was talking about resellers on Have I Been Pwned and wanting to look at banning the resellers from Have I Been Pwned. Now, a few people who are not using resellers got a bit upset about this. So I need to qualify what that means. Resellers are organizations that do nothing other than interface between us and the end customer for the financial transaction. They add nothing else. They do not offer support or guidance or integration. They simply say, hey, Acme Core, do you want to buy that thing from Have I Been Pwned? Yes, let us buy it for you. And that's it. That's it. And obviously there's a reason why companies use this service because we've got a bunch of them. And the reasons usually amount to one or two different things, possibly both. One is the company has a strict policy of we cannot purchase with credit card, which is unfortunate because we cannot accept anything but credit card. We use Stripe for all of our payments. We're an Australian entity accepting payments in US dollars. We've gone round and round and round with Stripe with this. I've literally sat there in Stripe HQ with people. There is no way for us to do this at present, which kind of sucks because it should just be really simple. Stripe, if you're an American entity, they have things like virtual account numbers. And someone can make a purchase from Stripe, they can get an invoice, and then they pay to the virtual account number. And when they pay, Stripe automatically does the reconciliation, raises webhooks and events for things like invoice paid, and you're good to go. We cannot do that. So that's one problem. The other problem is many organizations say, you just have to use this reseller. Full stop. That's it. This is what Pfizer used to do in my nearly decade and a half of increasing pain there. We had to purchase everything through a reseller. Now, I'll give you a good example. So someone, since I did the last weekly update, reached out. They were from a school in a state in the US where they said, look, we have a legal requirement where we cannot use credit card. Oh, sounds a bit harsh. I wonder if that's true. And then he sent me a link to the publicly accessible documentation, which is like, you are legally not allowed to use a credit card to make a purchase. Well, that sucks, because what does this guy do? You know, I don't want to take away a service which has been useful for them and is out there doing a good in the world, take it away purely because they've got factors outside of their control. I don't agree with the factors, but that is what it is. So I'm a little bit, excuse me, I'm a little bit sympathetic to this guy and people in his situation. So we're not at the point of completely binning it yet. And I have gone back over it and thought about it more and more and more and more. And I keep thinking about folks like this guy who are having trouble. But then there's the other voice in my head going, geez, these resellers suck. Now, somehow this actually got press. So I got up this morning, there were 2 news stories about Have I Been Pwned considering dropping resellers. And just to be clear as well, that these resellers, like I had some people who say using an MSP or might be an MSP. And they're like, does that bin us? It's like, well, no, because you're building a service. I've got to get this cough out. We can make it to the end. Okay, you're building a service for someone, and you might be integrating it into a larger application, for example, or you're providing support around this, or you're helping them translate the data into something, like you're adding some sort of value. And not only that, but when you want the key, you just go to Have I Been Pwned and you buy, like, you're fine. We love you guys. What I don't love is the reseller. And even when I look at my wall of graphs at the moment, I can see all our outstanding tickets down here. And I can see like multiple tickets here that are from resellers. Because resellers want a combination of, you've got to go through and create quotes. Now, we can automate this away, and this is the thing that we're looking at with Stefan. You know, like, how much of this do we automate away because it's a good thing to do versus how much are we doing just to satisfy resellers? But, you know, they'll want things like quotes every time we come up for renewal. They'll want renewal quotes manually made. They will literally argue about the fact that we've changed pricing. Can you imagine that? Like, you go to buy your Netflix subscription. And keeping in mind, Have I Been Pwned subscriptions started a lot less than a Netflix subscription too. Netflix has put their prices up 15% or something like that. And you just send them an email, could you please justify the price increase? I'd be like, screw you, man. Go and watch something else. So it's that sort of behavior. And I like the headline from the Register here. The Register says, Have I Been Pwned likely to ban resellers from buying subs, citing shitty behavior and onerous support requests. Now, they replaced the I with a star, so you didn't know it was shitty, but it's shitty. So, I guess long story short, I think if we had a solution to do non-credit card payment in an automated fashion, I'd have much higher degree of confidence in killing resellers. Unfortunately, we don't. And I think it may come to Stripe later on to be able to support our use case, but we don't know when. And I don't think it's a this year sort of thing either. I think we will probably have to find a way to fully automate the things that resellers do. And then we might just have to say, look, if you can't go down this, and I honestly think that would cover 90% of the reseller use cases. If you can't go down that fully automated route, we can't help you. Now, I won't name them, but there's an example of one reseller in particular that we end up banning. And we banned this reseller. So now every time a customer comes up and says, you know, I use this reseller, can we buy from them? It's like, no. Here are other ones who are fine. But this one reseller quite obnoxiously demanded that we must sign their agreement. Look, You're buying from us. You agree to our terms. We don't agree to your terms. That's not how it works. You know, how many times, imagine a customer walks into your shop and they're like, I'd like to buy some of your noodles. Okay, here's the noodles. Okay, I'll buy your noodles, but I need you to sign my 20-page legal document first. Screw you, man. No, we're not doing that. Scott says, nobody has yet given me a compelling reason for resellers that operate like this to exist. No, I have lots of uncompelling reasons. I think, mate, there's some in like bizarro procurement world where the Nevilles just sit there and crunch numbers and do boring stuff. By bundling it all together, there is some financial enterprise bargaining. I don't know. I'm struggling. I just don't think it's a good reason. James says, I keep thinking Troy should have one sanctioned reseller. You know, there is one reseller that is by far and away the most significant one. I got to check with Charlotte, but I suspect that they're like 80% plus of the reseller sales. And I did actually say to her during this week when we keep throwing this idea around, I said, maybe, I wonder if there's someone like us, you know, like a nice person, a techie person in there that I can just contact and go, mate, can we just automate away all of this and then we will make you the sole reseller? I wonder if we can do that. I think you might be right, James. I might push that. I might see where I can go with that. I wouldn't be surprised if this reseller themselves use Have I Been Pwned and I can find the equivalent of one of us there and I can chat to them. I might check with Charlotte, like what percentage of our sales are from that reseller, and of the remaining ones, if they kick up a stink, well, I'll rephrase it. Of the remaining ones, how likely would we be able to just chop them and have customers that would have used those go to the other ones? Because then the only gap that you're really left with is what happens when there is a company who demands that they only use one particular reseller. I do know that particularly places like Germany, it seems that a lot of German companies want to use one or two resellers that are German. So I'm not sure what would happen then if we're like, no, you can't use those, you've got to use these other guys. And also, if we're going to automate away a lot of this stuff, does it then matter as much? I'm just not sure. Now, Stephen made an interesting point here. He said, you should sell Have I Been Pwned vouchers to get around resellers. We were sort of wondering if there was sort of a model like that, not to get around resellers, but to make it easier such that, I don't want to make it sound like a gift card, but you know, like if you purchase a gift card, it doesn't matter where you purchase it from. It just matters that you have the card with the code. So, you know, if there's just like a code, I don't know. I don't think that's helping. Mark said you could add a second payment process for other forms of payment. We've thought about that, and we've had that request many times before because people have said things like, I'd like to pay with PayPal. The problem is that, first of all, that this is a tiny slice of our audience. And again, just to recap the figures from last week, 0.86% of our active subscribers come from resellers. So we're talking about less than 1 in 100. Now, of that 0.86%, they do have a much bigger skew towards the highest tier of service we offer. So they represent a larger proportion than 0.86% in terms of revenue, but it's still like small single digits. So we're left with this very small window. The thing is with Stripe, we've integrated Stripe so intimately into the process of how subscriptions are issued and keys are kept active and renewed. You know, every single time there's a payment, for example, it's in Stripe, it raises a webhook, it updates things and Have I Been Pwned. Now, you know, if we wanted to support another provider, we would need to have another webhook endpoint so that that provider could raise webhooks and then extend the subscription. And we're just starting to add a lot of other moving parts for a tiny, tiny slice of the audience. And if we're going to be doing extra moving parts, would we be better doing things like automating quotes, which would be beneficial to non-reseller customers as well? Or would we be better off, you know, integrating PayPal or integrating crypto payments or something like that? So that's where we're left with that one. VXDB says, if a company can't pay with credit card, how are they paying the reseller? Bank transfer. Yes, it is bank transfer. It's literally that. And inevitably what resellers will do, again, speaking of my many years in Pfizer, the resellers will bundle all this up such that you go and you're purchasing from the reseller. The reseller's got their own catalog of things. You make all of these purchases, and then they would then give you, for example, a monthly bill, and they would send you an invoice. And of course, they mark it up. I mean, one of these resellers accidentally somehow managed to copy us back into the thread, which included the invoice that they'd sent to their customer, and they had marked up the price 136%. So imagine that. Like, we're looking at this service that Charlotte and Steph and I pour our hearts and souls into. The vast majority of it we give away for free, and then we charge for this like one little slice of it. And then this reseller who's a parasite, let's be honest, marks it up 136%. So anyway, they mark it up 136% or whatever, and they bundle it all together, and then they send an invoice to the company. And because Neville in the procurement department of the company says that they must have 60-day terms, then they've got 60 days to pay it. And so that's how it works. They just literally get paid via different channels, and they just pay a lot more. Stefan's delegating Scott to support person if he sells our stuff. James says, work with one reseller and automate the problems away. The rest of the resellers have to come in line with what you develop. I think we've just got to look at where these gaps are, and it's multiple things. Part of it is mechanical procurement stuff, which would be beneficial to other customers as well. Generating invoice. Let me rephrase that. Generating quotes. I always think quotes. Just remember the first time I started getting asked for quotes. Someone go, "Hi, I'd like to buy like your Pwn 3 subscription for whatever it was, $50, let's say. Could you give me a quote?" It's like, well, the price is on the website. Yeah, but could you print that into a PDF and send it to me? Why don't you print it into a PDF? Control P, choose PDF. Oh yeah, but we need our company name on it as well. Oh, okay. Oh. So you can buy exactly what is already there on the website. Anyway, apparently that's the thing. So Stripe has APIs to be able to generate quotes. So, we can do that. A lot of companies want invoices as well. Now, the problem with Stripe, and this is an immutable problem by all accounts, is the only way you can get an invoice on Stripe when you have this subscription style model is after the subscription begins. So we have to start the subscription in order to raise the invoice. And then that's a bit of a problem, because now the subscription has started and the clock is ticking and it's eating away at their 1 year of time, but they haven't actually paid the bill. We can always not activate the subscription and have it been pwned until they pay the bill, because we can literally listen for invoice.paid or whatever the webhook is. But they've still lost, say, the 2 weeks of their subscription where they've taken it out and they haven't paid the bill. Now, we can put all that in terms and things as well. It just feels a bit shitty where, it's like, hey, if you'd like to use this service, here's an invoice. You're paying for it now, regardless of whether you've actually paid for it. So there is that level of stuff, which I think that we can automate away. There is this other level of stuff, which I think, again, we can fix by other means, but it'll be things like, hi, our customer can't access the service. Well, that's because you gave us an email address for the customer, which we then put in Stripe via metadata, which fed through into Have I Been Pwned, which on their subscription has got, john@acmecore.com, but they're logging in with security@acmecore.com. And you're in this Chinese whispers loop trying to figure out what the person's actually. So, we might, for example, just have a blanket position where we say we will only provide support directly to the customer. And that does kind of solve a lot of the problems. But even then, the customer's got to figure out that issue. But I think part of that is in maybe if we need to send notifications or something that we're not doing already, you have just signed up for this service with this email address. You need to use this email. You wouldn't believe how many tickets we get, even outside of resellers, where people say, hey, I just logged on to Have I Been Pwned to do my domain search, and it says I don't have a subscription. What gives? It's like, well, you took out the subscription under John at, and you're logging in under Mary at. Yeah, two different people. That's why your subscription doesn't work. I guarantee there'll be tickets right there on that screen right now that are that. Anyway. Jono says, can you use Xero for invoicing? So we do use Xero for invoicing for non-API key / domain search purchases. So we use it. We've got some enterprise subscribers, 1Password, for example, Mozilla Firefox Monitor, that sort of stuff where it doesn't go through the online credit card thing. And we do all that, even things like reconciliation, we do manually, but there's only a very small number of them. So it's feasible. We don't want to do that for folks where everything goes through Stripe. And it's sort of like the answer I just gave Mark around, can you have different payment providers? Well, if we do that, excuse me, then we've got to tie that into the whole processing cycle as well. So we've then got to have webhooks that Xero would call when an invoice is paid, and so on and so forth. And it gets very, very, very messy. I think we're going to solve this by automating away the quotes and the invoices and things like that. And we'll be in a much better position. James says, use a password manager, you dummy, and you'll know how to log in. Hat tip to this week's sponsor, 1Password. Yes, if you use a password manager to store the email address that you use to sign up to the service, you would always remember it. That would be helpful. As Scott says, geez, trying to find out whose account we need to activate a subscription on. Yeah, so Scott has the same problem with the Port URI, like trying to join all these dots. I'm sure there are better ways, but part of the problem as well is we're trying to be very privacy preserving. Now, we could very easily say when John at Acme Core goes to the dashboard and sees he doesn't have a subscription, we could say, hey, John, did you know that Mary at Acme Core has an account? But then you're making the assumption that John should have the right to see who else on the same domain has an account. And then imagine what happens when you get into public email providers. Oh, that's messy. No, we can never do that. So anyway, we don't do that. All right, I'm going to wrap it up there. Hopefully by next week, we'll have a clearer vision on the reseller stuff. A lot of this does also tie into, when we talk about automating and building more interfaces, it ties into the UX work we're talking about, because we want to build all this on the new UX. Hopefully I can talk more about that next week. I think we'll have a much clearer view. And Stefan, you joined a little bit after, but I said I think we should think about open sourcing and making public those interfaces as static pages before we go and build them into the whole system. So let's talk more about that. Thanks, folks.